Hello students. Can you believe how much you have changed from when you were just 3 years old? You were a toddler, just playing with toys. You did not go to school. Now, fast forward to the present day when you are 13 years old. Can you think of all the changes that have happened in the past 10 years? Maybe you have started school, discovered new hobbies, or even traveled to new places. It's amazing to see how much we have changed and grown in just a decade, that is a period of 10 years. And not just us, even the world around us has undergone changes in the last thousands of years. In the past, there were ancient civilizations, there was no modern technology or even the structured roads, transports, or anything that we see around us. In this chapter, we will try to answer some of the questions from the previous world and understand them better. Now, why this chapter is named Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Just like a detective finds clues or trace events to solve the mystery, we will trace the events from our history and will explore the following aspects of this chapter. First, Indian map by Al-Idris, and French cartographer. Second, new and old terminologies, and third, historians and their sources. Let's begin with understanding the Indian map by Al-Idris, and French cartographer. We will learn about the first change that occurred in the last 1,000 years during the evolution of maps. Maps have been an essential tool for humans for thousands of years, helping us navigate and explore the world around us. Students, have you ever looked at a map and wondered how it was made or who made it? Well, it's not just about drawing lines and shapes on paper. The art and science of creating maps to represent geographical areas is called cartography. Cartography is a complex process, and the people who create these maps are called cartographers. Now, let's take a look at two maps made at different times by two different cartographers. The first one was created by an Arab geographer named Al-Idrisi, way back in 1154, and the second one by a French cartographer in 1720. Surprisingly, both maps depict the Indian subcontinent, but they are quite different from each other. Al-Idrisi's map is marked with Arabic place names, and it even has some familiar ones, like Kannauj in Uttar Pradesh. But it also shows South India in the place of North India and Sri Lanka at the top. Map 2, on the other hand, made almost 600 years later, is more recognizable to us with detailed coastal areas. This map was used by European sailors and merchants on their voyages. However, it's not just about the maps, but also the science of cartography that changed over time. It's important for historians to be sensitive to the different historical contexts in which information about the past was produced. Now, let's move on to the second topic, that is, new and old terminologies. But first, here is an interesting fact for you. Did you know that the word gift in English means a present or something given to someone? But in German, gift means poison. Now, what comes to your mind when I say nice? The word nice in modern English is used to describe something that is pleasant, right? However, in earlier times, nice meant foolish. It's interesting to see how words can have different meanings based on language and time period. Now, can you imagine why we sometimes struggle to understand words used in older books or movies? Well, it's not just because the language is old, but because the meanings of words also change over time. The meaning of words and phrases can shift dramatically over time, so it's important to understand the context in which they were used. By studying language changes over time, we can learn a lot about how societies and cultures evolve. Students, do you know there is another name for our country apart from India, which is Hindustan? And do you know about the origins of the word Hindustan? Today we know it as the modern-day nation-state of India, but did you know that its meaning has evolved over time? In the 13th century, a chronicler named Minhaj-e-Siraj used the term Hindustan to refer to the areas of Punjab, Haryana, and lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. He used it to describe lands that were under the dominion of the Delhi Sultan, without any political or national association. The term's meaning changed over time with the extent of the Sultanate, but it never included South India. By the early 16th century, Babur used the word to describe the geography, fauna, and culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. His understanding of Hindustan was similar to that of the 14th century poet Amir Khusro, who used the word Hind to describe a geographical and cultural entity. Interestingly, the idea of a geographical and cultural entity like India did exist, but the term Hindustan did not carry the political and national meanings that we associate with it today. Moving on, what does it mean to be a foreigner? You might think that a simple word like foreigner would have meant the same thing then as it does now. But you would be surprised to learn that it actually had a very different meaning. Back in the medieval period, a foreigner was not just someone from another country. It was anyone who was not a part of a particular society or culture. So, for example, a person from a different village might have been considered a foreigner by the people of another village. But two peasants from the same village were not foreigners to each other, even if they came from different religious or caste backgrounds. So, students, these were just two examples of how the meaning of words can change over time, depending on the context in which they are used. As a historian, it is important to be careful about the words we use and to understand their historical meanings. Lastly, let's learn about the last topic of this video, that is, historians and their sources. We know that historians are professionals who study and interpret the past. But how do they know what happened in the past? Well, they rely on sources. Sources can be anything that provides information about the past, such as diaries, letters, photographs, official documents, artifacts, and oral histories. Historians study these sources to understand what happened in the past and provide an accurate and reliable account of historical events. So, let's take a journey through time to learn about the 1,000 years that followed, from around 700 AD to 1750 AD. During the Gupta dynasty and the great ruler Harshavardhana, different types of sources were used to learn about the past, and during this period, we see some changes in the sources people relied on. People still used coins, inscriptions, and architecture to gather information, but these sources evolved eventually with texts. With paper becoming cheaper and more readily available, people began to write more and more. Recording everything from holy texts and chronicles of rulers to letters and teachings of saints, petitions and judicial records, and registers of accounts and taxes. These manuscripts were collected and preserved by wealthy people, rulers, monasteries, and temples, providing historians with a wealth of detailed information about the past. But wait, there's a catch. While these manuscripts are incredibly informative, they were also difficult to use. Now, imagine you are a detective trying to solve a mystery, but the only clues you have are handwritten notes, and each note has been copied and changed slightly by different people over the years. This is similar to the challenge historians face when they study the past using manuscripts. Just like your friend's homework, handwritten notes and manuscripts can be difficult to read and interpret. And just like how you might make mistakes while copying your friend's work, scribes who copied manuscripts also introduced small changes. Historians would need to use all of their skills to carefully examine each copy and compare them to each other to figure out what the original document might have said. This can be a time-consuming and difficult task, but it is essential to understand the past. By studying manuscripts, historians can learn about the beliefs, ideas, and events of people from the past and how they have shaped our world today. In the 14th century, a writer named Ziauddin Barni wrote a chronicle, which is like a historical story, but 2 years later, he decided to make some changes and wrote another version of the same story. The problem is, Historians didn't even know the first version existed until the 1960s. It was lost in large library collections for centuries, and nobody had been able to find it. Can you imagine how exciting it must have been for historians to finally discover this lost piece of history? It's like finding a hidden treasure. So students, with this, we have covered a part of the chapter. To conclude, we have learned a lot about the different aspects of history in this video. We explored cartography and how the art and science of creating maps have evolved over time. We discussed how language and terminologies can change their meanings over time and how it is essential for historians to understand their historical context. We also looked at how sources of information have changed over time, with the introduction of texts as a crucial source of information. As we can see, history is not just about studying dates and events but understanding the changes that have occurred over time and how they have influenced the world we live in today. Now that you have understood the topic, open the EduRev app and take the test of this chapter. Your marks are going to tell whether you have understood the topic. Also, here is an amazing secret. You get video lectures, chapter notes, and MCQ tests for all the chapters in the EduRev app. That's the magic of EduRev courses. You get everything in a single place. And, not just social studies, you get amazing courses for maths, science, English, Hindi, and much more on EduRev. Thank you.